Lesh passed away pretty recently, and if you don't know, I'm actually a pretty big fan of the Grateful Dead. Like, I got the Terrapin Station tattoo and everything. So today I'm just gonna listen to a couple of my Grateful Dead records and basically talk in depth about Phil Lesh. I plan on doing a video on him pretty soon, though we'll see how it goes. Basically, a lot of the time when I start a video, I start by doing a read-through of as much information I have as possible, and then I pick out what I think is the most interesting, and I leave the conversation on from there. I haven't listened to this record in a while. I don't know how well it still plays. But let's find out. And I hope I'm making sound too. I'm sure this will get hit as a copyright claim. I'll probably post this online eventually. But right now, I don't think I'll worry about it too much. Hello, little one. Grabbing cars over there. I see you. Yeah. Hmm. 4 years ago, wow. Okay. Then I'm also joining up in my own stream so I can monitor it and make sure nothing crazy happens. Like, who's really online on a Monday morning to check things out? I don't know. But anyway, as we start, Philip Lesh, born March 15th, 1940. 1940. Oh God, what year is it? So he died when he was 84 years old. October 25th, 2024. Now then, anybody know what a March 15th birth would be? Alright, so historically, March 15th was pretty significant in World War II, apparently. But I did a quick Google search to try to figure out what like astrological sign Phil Lesh would be if he was born on March 15th. I don't study astrology that much. It's the Ides of March, so that's historically when Julius Caesar was murdered. None of this is that important. It's also Andrew Jackson's birthday, so Phil Lesh was born on the same day as Andrew Jackson. That's interesting, but not quite like relevant to what I'm doing. He's a Pisces. He's a fish. Ha! That's funny. So I've also been on a huge Tyler the Creator kick. He's also a Pisces. Small other fun fact. So Phil Lesh was born March 15th, 1940, and he was born in California, which was my own home state that I miss very much. I'm not crazy about Vermont, but here I am. So let's see. He was born in Berkeley, California, which is Northern California, a little bit away from the Bay Area if you've ever been in that part. I went to a concert out there pretty recently. He was the only child of Frank Lesh and Barbara Chapman. So Barbara, his mom, was actually a piano player. And his father encouraged him to take up violin. Phil Lesh was a classically trained musician. He was really good on trumpet in particular, I believe. Before he joined the Grateful Dead, he actually joined the Grateful Dead and didn't know how to play bass, so he was learning as he went. Yeah, so he was enrolled in the Berkeley High School, where he switched over to trumpet and participated in the school musical, like extracurricular activities. Once again, Phil Lesh was classically trained in music. He really knew what he was doing, but he wasn't trained in bass when he joined up with the Grateful Dead, which is an interesting fact. He studied the instrument under Bob Hansen, conductor of the Symphonic Golden Gate Park Band, and became interested in avant-garde classical music and free jazz. So, you know, that kind of feeds into the Grateful Dead's experimental sound and nature of it. A lot of it was also Phil Lesh's roots in that avant-garde jazz and that experimental sound. By his mid-teens, inspired by Beethoven, he actually wanted to be a composer. Do I have this echoing? Am I just hearing that twice? I'll take a moment of silence just for you. I guess it wasn't complete silence because we had music in the background, but let there be songs to fill the air. As I was saying, so Lesh was enrolled in the College of San Mateo, where he wrote and arranged for the community college's big band and played trumpet. San Mateo, California, that's an interesting place. But after transferring his sophomore year to the University of Berkeley in 1961, he would meet the Grateful Dead's then keyboardist, Tom Constantine. I'm going to be saying a lot of names wrong. I have a mild case of dyslexia, which I ignore, but who cares? Anyway, so at his keyboard friend's suggestion, he actually would go off and start studying Italian modernist for the colleges in 1962. While volunteering for the radio station as a recording engineer, Phil Lesh met the bluegrass banjo player, Jerry Garcia. At the time, and actually continually, Jerry Garcia was always an avid banjo player, which is something I've talked about before, which is extra fascinating when you consider the fact that Jerry was missing this finger here. So, meeting a 9-fingered banjo player who happened to be really into bluegrass and convinced him to play bass in his band, that's pretty fascinating. Phil Lesh is an interesting figure. So Lesh briefly worked in the post office department where he drove a service truck, and in 1965 he saw Jerry Garcia's band The Warlocks in concert and was impressed. The Warlocks was the name the Grateful Dead originally went by until eventually changing it over to the Grateful Dead. I believe it's because the Warlocks was already taken, which was taken by the Velvet Underground, so that was a combination of it. So, from their concert, a few weeks later, Garcia invited him to become the band's bassist, which, as I've mentioned a couple times, is really interesting because Phil Lesh didn't play bass. He was a classically trained trumpet player and a composer. So he was pretty much learning how to play bass on the job. He never played bass, guitar. According to Lesh, the first song he rehearsed with the band was I Know You Rider. If you know I Know You Rider, it's a pretty interesting and easy song. It's only 3 chords. I know you rider, gonna miss me when I'm gone. I'm not gonna dive into it too much. But he joined the third and the gig and stayed until the very end. The group changed its name to the Grateful Dead and began playing at the acid test parties where LSD was still being tested. The acid test back in the 60s was a huge gathering back in the day where basically a writer was actually encouraging people to take LSD and figure out what was going on while they played all kinds of weird sounds. It was the group of the Merry Pranksters, and the Grateful Dead happened to be playing there as well. I remember reading a quote before that Phil Lesh said, hey, you know what this stuff needs is us, and that's how they got the gig. But while reading through the simple Wikipedia articles and stuff, I'm not finding that information as much. Anyway, as Lesh had never played bass, I already read that. In his autobiography, he actually would go on to talk about how his influence from Jack Cassidy of Jefferson Airplane. I'm also a big Jorma Kaukonen fan, and Hot Tuna in particular. Jack Cassidy is an absolute monster, a great match to Jorma Kaukonen. But Jack Cassidy was, and actually, the Jefferson Airplane was the first band to really take off out of San Francisco. I know they've been overshadowed by the Grateful Dead quite a bit. Even today, years after Jerry Garcia has passed. 30 years? Hold on. Huh. Getting away from myself. So Jack Cassidy was an early influence on Phil Lesh, and he was, once again, one of the founders of that San Francisco sound. The psychedelic rock roots. Jefferson Airplane was the first people to get that success, and then eventually it led to the Grateful Dead. As an influence on the direction in which his instincts were taking him, he said his play style was more in Bach's theory of counterpoint rather than a traditional bassist. So this is getting into some classical music theory, but basically there are counterpoint melodies, so instead of playing along with the regular melody or just simply playing the bass note, Phil Lesh was targeting different harmonic frequencies that would make the music a little more interesting. He also cited Jack Bruce of Cream as an influence. So power trio, in those power trio groups, the bass has to be a big part of the group. Lesh became a musical innovator in the new role of the electric bass around the 1960s. Contemporary bass players such as Cassidy Bruce, James Jameson, and Paul McCartney had adopted a more melodic musical approach, while Phil Lesh was playing it essentially like a lead instrument, offering alternate points of focus. So, before this, bass players in rock had genuinely played a conventional timekeeping role, you know, E, 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 A. Like musically, that's the equivalent of it. while, while underpinning the harmonic structure of the chord. So, typically, if you're playing bass, you play the 1 and the 5. Do. Once in a while, you might play the 3. And then you can play bass for a million songs like it, but that's not as exciting. Okay. Lesh's 6-string bass complemented Jerry Garcia's guitar solos in the cascade of notes and unusual time signatures. Early on, Phil Lesh grasped the sonic possibilities presented by recording studio, and his style of playing often left complaints by the band's record label. So, one of the criticisms about the Grateful Dead that's always consistent is they didn't make any good records. They were an absolutely amazing live band a lot of the time. Sometimes they had bad nights, but just it's hard to convey that gigantic wall of sound compressed into a record, into an album, and this is pretty consistent. But anyway, we later wrote acclaimed studio sessions among the sun, according to the music critic, the catalyst of chaos within the band, apparent that nobody in the organization has enough influence over Phil Lesh to invert any normal behavior. So back in the day, music critics were basically criticizing Phil Lesh's playing because he wasn't playing as a traditional bass player, you know, not the 1, 2, 3, 4, E, A, E. It was more of a harmonic counterpoint inspired by classical music. Now then, Lesh was not a prolific composer or singer with the Grateful Dead, though he did occasionally make contributions such as the opening track on American Beauty, Box of Rain. Box of Rain is definitely Phil Lesh's biggest song. It's a beautiful song. He co-wrote several of the band's best-known compositions, including Saint Stephen, The 11, and Dark Star. Saint Stephen will be on this album in a little while. I'm sure everybody knows that song. His high tenor voice contributed to the Grateful Dead's 3-part harmony section in their group vocals in the early days of the band, until he largely relinquished the singing parts to Donna Goldchecks and Brett Midland in 1974, becoming a vocal cord damage from improper singing technique. That's another criticism of the Grateful Dead. They never really had that great of a singer. I liked Jerry Garcia a lot. I think his singing had a lot of soul, but he wasn't the best singer. Bob Weir was pretty good too, but Bob Weir still was developing it. And Phil Lesh, he's an alright singer, but once again, not the best singers in the world. Now then, Lesh introduced his bandmates to He introduced his bandmates to different jazz music, such as John Coltrane. All of the band's shows were recorded by Deadhead tapers, and it became possible to listen to any given performance from 1972 to 1974, and hear the Grateful Dead interpreting the musical innovations that Lesh stimulated through Coltrane's influence. Once again, Phil Lesh was heavily inspired by trumpet players. He played trumpet classically, and he was also inspired by John Coltrane. He was inspired more by counterpoint and the alternate innovations and sounds, rather than the traditional bass playing of Paul McCartney, for example. Throughout the Dead's career, his interest in jazz avant-garde music remained a crucial influence on the group. He later introduced the band to composer Charles Ives, which created their ability to go spontaneously from discordant jam into blues or country songs. If you listen to the Grateful Dead concerts, they do a lot of bouncing. Sometimes they get very different. With contributions from Owsley Stanley, the Dead's one-time sound engineer, they created the Wall of Sound, and the Wall of Sound is a sight to behold. If you haven't seen it already, just Google an image. But it's an enormous sound station, and from what I've read before, basically Phil Lesh's bass each string was attached to a different tower on that Wall of Sound. So Phil Lesh's specific area, any string he played would boom out of one section, really adding to the ambiance of the sound. Shoot. The Okay. After 2 years of problem solving and planning, the 40-foot high wall of sound was first used publicly in Cow's Palace in San Francisco on March 23rd, 1974, with 9 independent channels. The powerful system contained 604 speakers, driven by 26,400 watts of power. Lesh's combined playing through the system to piloting a flying saucer or writing your own sound wave. So when you're playing in front of all these people, in front of this giant system of sound, it feels like you're writing waves whenever you play a note. If you've ever performed live, especially if you perform live as a bassist, you feel when you're playing those notes. According to Lesh, Owsley persuaded the Dead to record every one of their shows, emphasizing the necessity of listening to tapes. So the taping culture of the Grateful Dead was highly encouraged because their sound was different all the time. The songs were never the same, the set list was never written down, and it's just a really fascinating way to look at it. In 1994, Phil Lesh was introduced to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a member of the Grateful Dead. So just a year before Jerry died. After the Grateful Dead disbanded, Lesh continued to play the band's music in concert with offshoots, The Other Ones, The Dead, and promoted San Francisco's hippie philosophy, as well as performing with his own band, Phil Lesh and Friends. In 1999 and 2000, he co-headlined 2 tours with Bob Dylan. Lesh published his autobiography, Searching for the Sound, My Life with the Grateful Dead, in 2005. In 2009, he went on tour with the remaining members of the Grateful Dead. After the 2009 summer tour, Lesh formed a band with Bob Weir named Further, which debuted in September 2009. I've seen Further. I thought they were really good. I guess I'll never get to see Further again, as a small, sad side note. But yeah, they were great. Phil Lesh, Bob Weir. I've also seen Wolf Brothers with Bob Weir. I liked it, but it wasn't... I'm not as crazy for it. In 2012, Lesh founded a music venue called Terrapin Crossroads. Terrapin Station, over in San Rafael, California. If you're a California native, this is pretty high up in California. Like, you gotta keep going north to get there. The venue officially opened on March 8th, 2012, with the first run of 12 concerts by Phil Lesh and Friends. When not on tour, Lesh's son, Graham and Brian, served as the house band at Terrapin Crossroads. In addition to songs from the Dead catalog, Lesh played material by Mumford & Sons, Zac Brown Band, and other contemporary acts with his sons. Terrapin Crossroads closed on November 21st when their lease on the property expired. I didn't know that. I moved out of California a little while ago. That makes me a bit sad to hear. Lesh began performing again with Phil Lesh and Friends in 2012. Further disbanded in early 2014 at the age of 74, Lesh ceased touring full-time. So 2014, he stopped touring completely. Thereafter, he performed regularly at his Terrapin Crossroads with various Phil Lesh and Friends lineups, as well as with the Terrapin Family Band. In early 2010s, he performed selected shows at venues throughout the United States, notably the Capitol Theater in Port Chester, New York, as well as at festivals. He took part in the 2015 Fare Thee Well concert and a short North American tour with Bob Weir in the spring of 2018. In 2020, the Rolling Stones ranked him as the 11th greatest bass player. In March 2023, he celebrated his 83rd birthday and 100th show at the Capitol Theater. So I'm going to take a quick, move aside just so I could figure out who else was on the Rolling Stones' top bass players rank. 11th greatest bass player, I feel, is a little, it's not quite accurate. I think Phil Lesh was great. Rolling Stones. If you happen to know off the top of your head, let me know who they ranked the top bass players. I'm pretty sure I won't agree with most of this. Social media. Quick search. No, that's not what I wanted. Rolling Stones players ranked. Oh, so the record just stopped. I'm going to flip it over. Does anybody know how to pronounce this record? This one. No. You're not going to be able to pronounce it online. Unless you can just yell it at your camera and yell it loud enough for me to hear. Anyway, Rolling Stones, 50 greatest bass players of all time. Before I get back into diving about Phil Lesh, from what I just read, they ranked him at number 50. That's also way too high. Thundercat is amazing, but that's not the purpose of this conversation. Okay, so yeah, 11, Phil Lesh. In the same way that the Grateful Dead reconfigured how a rock band should sound, looser and jammier, incorporating equal parts, don't give me an ad, computer, including equal parts jazz and country, Phil Lesh made us hear the bass in a new way. The Dead's foundation and longtime bassist grew up on experimental and classical music and played trumpet and violin in high school. He only took up his signature instrument when he was asked to join the Warlocks, the first version of the Dead. As a result, Lesh ignored standard working bass cliches. I didn't think that would be suitable for the music I would make with Jerry, just to do something somebody else had done. He said in 2014, his idea, play bass and lead at the same time. His notes darting in and around the melody became as recognizable a part of the Dead sound as Garcia's guitar playing. His unconventional sound can be heard in studio recordings like Trucking, Shakedown Street, and Cumberland Blues, the live version of Scarlet Begonias from the legendary 1977 show, and many live versions of Eyes of the World. Yeah. All right. Next, once again, Phil Lesh was number 11. I just read through his article real fast. 10, Ron Carter. Ron Carter, really? Oh, A Tribe Called Quest, that makes sense. Paul McCartney's number 9. Not surprising. Jaco Pastorius is 8. Larry Graham is number 7. Okay. Jack Bruce is number 6. That's Cream. Carol Kane. Oh, I know quite a bit about her. Bootsy Collins is number 4. Oh, okay, that's well deserved. Number 3 is John Entwistle. Cool. That's The Who. Charles Mingus is number 2. Mingus. And James Jamerson is number 1. Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess I have no complaints about that for now. But we'll back to reading. Number 11, Rolling Stones. Number 11, greatest bass player, Phil Lesh. Ox o moxo ah. Ah. Thank you. You know, I always say something like oxomoxia or something like that. I never say it quite perfectly, but hey, what can you do? So Lesh married Jill Johnstone, a waitress from the cafe next door to the Grateful Dead's office in San Francisco. That's cool. They had 2 sons, Graham and Brian, both of whom became musicians and played with their father in the town. They frequently played together, both publicly and privately. They performed in an annual benefit concert known as Philharmonia, dating from 1977, including December 18, 2011 at a Christmas gig, which included Bob Weir and Jackie Green, at the Tenderloin Middle School cafeteria, attended by 250 people. Tenderloin Middle School? You can name schools after, like... Yes, Oxyotl. I like that one. So for a long time I had the image, like the main image of the album as like my profile on a couple of different gaming things when I was really into the Grateful Dead. It was always kind of funny to me. But yeah, they got a couple albums that are difficult to pronounce. Shoot, you ever hear what Jerry Garcia originally wanted to name the Grateful Dead? Like Mythical, Ethical, Icicle, Tricycle? They had a thing with names. I'm kind of glad they didn't go with that. Wouldn't that be awesome? Anyway, Lesh and his wife administered their children's charitable organization, the Unbroken Chain Foundation. Lesh had a lifelong interest in the occult and was a member of Research into Lost Knowledge organization. In 1998, Lesh underwent a liver transplant as a result of chronic hepatitis C infection. He became an outspoken advocate for organ donations on live recordings of various performances. That's interesting, I didn't know that. In October 26, 2006, Lesh stated on his official website that he had been diagnosed with prostate cancer, the disease that killed his father, and would be undergoing an operation in December of 2006. On December 7, 2006, he reported that he had undergone the surgery and the cancer had been removed. October 2015, Lesh announced that he had bladder cancer surgery. He stated that his prognosis was good and that he expected to make a full recovery. So there were multiple moments for Phil Lesh where he had health concerns. I mean, he did pass away at 80, which is lovely thing. 80 is a pretty good age. It sounds like he struggled with cancer a number of times. He did have some health concerns. So, I just hope he went peacefully. In August of 2019, Lesh announced that he was undergoing back surgery and he and his band canceled engagements at the Outlaw Music Festival. He was expected to make full recovery. He died October 25th, 2024, at the age of 84. Yeah. Well, that's all that I have from this Wikipedia article. But, Wikipedia isn't the end all, know all of musicians and instrument. I'm sure I could dive into some of the Grateful Dead history, like, Palo Alto, California, the actual start of it. But I'm just starting to read through. And then I don't own Phil Lesh's book, but if anybody does, I'd love to hear like what he talks about in it. I was for a long time I was really more into Jerry Garcia, so I read Jerry Garcia's stories. I know at one point it mentioned that Jerry Garcia got pissed at Phil Lesh and threw him down a flight of stairs because it sounded bad to him, but when he listened back to the recording, it actually sounded pretty good. So that's always interesting. Grateful Dead history. Where else can I read a lot about Phil Lesh? There's a phillesh.net. I wonder what's there. But once again, you can probably borrow the book from your local library. Thank you. Thank you, my friend. I do have a local library near me. That is a good idea. I'll probably read through it. I do plan on doing a video on Phil Lesh pretty soon in the style of a lot of the videos I do. But, I want to know as much as I possibly can about a person before I do. Let me see. And in this website, they have image galleries. Oh, this will be useful for me. Merch, carts, but nothing I'm particularly looking at right now. Do. Okay. Basis, Anchored, Grateful Dead. Here's a New York Times article. It's good. What? Interesting. Roots. Cause of death. I mean, I guess I could look into his cause of death particularly. Unbroken Chain, Pride of Cucamonga, Box of Rain. Yeah, I love all of those. Ooh, I'm the Pride of Cucamonga. I heard that's one of the songs they almost never played live, Pride of Cucamonga in particular, though I did get to see Further play it, and that kind of blew me away. Unbroken Chain, that's also the name of his organization, and Box of Rain is definitely his most famous song, Just a box of rain. Like, that's, I heard people were performing that recently. What was it? Fish performed that at their concert? Dead fish cheese spread? Yeah, I imagine you would know that. But, I live in Vermont now. I know Fish is like from here, but I haven't seen them. I haven't seen them in the area. I've honestly never been to a Fish show. Let's see what else I can read. Health problems explored, founding member. Yeah, you know what? Let's do a search on all the Phil Lesh songs we can find. Lined up that I'm going to put, and then I'll just start playing actual music. I know he was credited for Dark Star and the 11, a lot of those more experimental, and I guess he was actually credited for writing a lot of Saint Stephen, which is really cool. That's an awesome song. You Don't Have to Ask. That's it for the other one. Caution, Don't Stop the Tracks. Oh, Cumberland Blues. That makes sense. That song's actually pretty complicated. They do like a complete key change in the middle of it. Gotta get down to the couple in mind. But anyway, Slipknot. No, that's another good one musically. Mason's Children, Standing on the Corner, Mindbender, Alligator, We Are the... But Phil Lesh didn't sing that much. Fandom. Oh, let's see how much is on here. Phil Lesh, born March 15th, 1940, was a Pisces. As another aside, is a musician and founding member. Yeah, I already know that. 30-year career. Lesh started out as a violin player in high school, switched to trumpet. I knew that as well. Antipodal musical interests. They formed a friendship, and eventually Lesh was talked into becoming the bass player for Grateful Dead. Yep. According to Lesh, first song they rehearsed is I Know You Writer. That's a really easy 1-4-5 progression. No. 1-5-4. I know you writer gonna ha 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 ha. Yeah, 1-5-4. It turns out that the band The Warlocks on the single also ended up changing their name to the Velvet Underground. He suggested that the other band members that they changed their name. The Velvet Underground and the Grateful Dead didn't get along that much. This is another aside to go down, but anyway, Lesh had never played bass before joining the band, which meant he learned on the job, but it also meant he had no preconceived attitudes towards how the bass should be played. He didn't necessarily play it as a rhythm instrument, he played it as another lead instrument. Indeed, he said that his playing style was influenced more by Bach's counterpoint than by rock or soul bass players. So that's drawing from that classical influence. If we go back into what I said earlier, the counterpoint ideology of classical music is pretty much constructed outside of the typical way that bands are used nowadays. Because if you're listening to a modern band as compared to a classical arrangement, basically the horns would be forming the chords, or the other instruments would be forming the chords because they were the loud enough instruments to be heard. So when somebody like Bach is doing those counterpoint type of arrangements, he's essentially making two different melodies that help counter each other out, and that's the mentality that Phil Lesh brought in when he was playing bass. It wasn't necessarily rooted in the traditional bass playing style, it was more rooted in that counterpoint. Anyway, said playing style influenced by Bach or soul, although one can also hear his fluidity and power of jazz basics such as Charles Mingus. Jimmy Garrison and Lesh's work, along with the stylistic allusions to like Jack Cassidy. Lesh, along with other musicians that included James Jamerson, Paul McCartney, Brian Wilson, Jack Bruce, John Entwistle, and Jack Cassidy, was an innovator in the new role that the electric bass developed during the 1960s. These players adopted a more melodic, counterpunctual approach to the instrument. Before this, bass players in rock had generally played a conventional timekeeping role. I already read stuff that's pretty much exactly the same as that. Lesh took his own improvised exercises during a song or instrumentation. Not all of the screaming and background noise is from the music. In many Dead jams, Lesh bass is, in essence, as much a lead instrument as Jerry Garcia's guitar. Lesh was not a prolific composer or singer with the Grateful Dead. This is pretty much exactly the same as I read in the other thing. Also, a snippet of the tape of Lesh on trumpet in college can be heard on Bob Weir's composition, Born Cross-Eyed. Oh, that's cool. After the disbanding of the Grateful Dead, Lesh continued to play. Yep. In 1998, he had a liver transplant, outspoken advocate for organ donations. Yeah, they literally saved his life. April 2005, Lesh's book Searching for My Sound, My Life with the Grateful Dead was published. The book takes its name from the lyrics of the Grateful Dead song Unbroken Chain, which, yeah, is a Phil Lesh composition. You do, in style down the avenue. This is the only book about the Grateful Dead written by a member of the band. That's interesting. I honestly didn't know that. Lesh released a statement on his official website revealing that he had been diagnosed with cancer. Yeah, I saw that. Undergo operations. Reunion tour. Okay, following 2009. So this article is actually shorter than the other one I just read. Alright, interesting. This is probably going to be at the point where I'm going to have to start doing my own more research rather than the typical Wikipedia article. So let me read about some of the Grateful Dead stuff and go from there. Once again, Phil Lesh was one of the original members, though he did replace a bass player. He actually joined when they were still the Warlocks. Okay, gospel, reggae, devoted fan base, Deads, yes. Grateful Dead was founded in San Francisco Bay Area during the rise of the counterculture movement of the 1960s. Founding members Jerry Garcia, Bob Weir, Pigpen, Phil Lesh, and Bill Kretzmann. Members of the Grateful Dead, originally known as the Warlocks, had played together in various Bay Area ensembles, including a traditional jug band. How did you play in like a jug band? Unbroken Chain was written in 1974, but they didn't play it live for 21 years. Wow, really? It's awesome. Once again, I heard them play Pride of Cucamonga when he was playing in Further, but I heard he never played that with the Grateful Dead. But that's always interesting to me. 1995, okay. So was this before Jerry died or after Jerry died? 21 years, Unbroken Chain. After Garcia's death in 1995, founding members of the band, along with other musicians, toured as the Other Ones. 1998, 2000, and 2002, and as the Dead in 2003, 2004, 2009, and 2015. I know they had a big Grateful Dead concert, what was it, the 50-year anniversary recently, where they had like the rainbows and everything at the Golden Gate Studio. That's awesome. The 4 surviving core members marked the band's 50th anniversary. Oh, it actually talks about it right here. The 4 surviving core members of the Grateful Dead marked the 50th anniversary of concerts in Santa Clara, California, and Chicago. They was billed as their last performance together. They also have several spin-offs featuring one or more core members, such as Dead and Company, Further, The Rhythm Devils, Phil Lesh and Friends, Rat Dog, and Billy and the Kids. I've seen Rat Dog. No, I've seen Wolf Brothers. Well, that's not that important. Despite having only one top 40 single in 30 years career of Grey, the Grateful Dead remained the highest grossing American touring act for decades. That's awesome. I love that. I wish it's become so difficult to tour as a musician nowadays. Like, I was doing decently well when I was just playing gigs all the time, though a lot of my success came when I was playing in an acoustic pop duo. Pop music always pays. Like, I got nothing against pop, some of that stuff's actually pretty good. But to be a touring act nowadays is so much more difficult ever since the pandemic and all of that shut so much down. Like, there's a lot of musicians I really look up to, even today, who seem to be having a difficult time, and that's why you see some musicians lining more and more into sponsorships, promoting different instruments, trying to start their own companies, all kinds of things. Despite having only one top 40 hit, I already said that, the band was introduced into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1994 in a recording of 1977. Yes. In 2004, Will, Lesh, Kurtzman, and Hart were recognized as part of the Kennedy Center Honors. The Grateful Dead began their career as the Warlocks. The group formed in the early 1965 for the remnants of a Palo Alto, California jug band called Mother McCree's Uptown Jug Champions. 19th Philly, Jerry died August 9th. Oh wow, so yeah, right before. That's actually interesting. July 1995, right before Jerry passed, we were actually right in front. Oh, that's so cool. I never got to see Jerry. I'm a little bit younger. I was born before he died, but my parents weren't listening to a lot of the Grateful Dead, so they never took me to concerts. They listened to a lot of reggae and R&B. I'm still a fan of both, but that's how it goes. As the Warlocks, the band's first show was at Magoo's Pizza Parlor at 639 Santa Cruz Avenue in the suburb of Milano Park, May 5th, 1965, now a Harvest Furniture Store. Progress, the March of Progress. The band continued playing bar shows like Frenchie's Bikini A Go-Go, that's awesome, in Hayward, and importantly, 5 sets a night, 5 nights a week for 6 weeks at the Inn Room in Belmont as the Warlocks. So back in the day, if you wanted to be like a performing band, your best bet was to get a gig at a bar or something and just get a steady show going on. This is still a thing today. If you're trying to perform music, you can get a steady gig somewhere. It's a huge plus. Record just ended. I'm going to flip that over. And then we'll go into another band music. No, not another band's music. We're going to another Grateful Dead record. Yep. That was this. I also use these lives to test what music is going to set off a copyright claim, just in case you're curious. So eventually this will be posted to probably my main channel, but for now, let's just not worry about it. And then it's a good thing to figure out what I can play in videos and what I can't play in videos, but this isn't too amazing. This is Working Man Dead. I really like this album. I think it's one of their better actual studio albums. This one and American Beauty are my personal favorites. I'm sure that's true for a lot of people, but we'll see. Oh. Cool. Now, where was I? Bands for show, Pizza Magoo, May 5th, 1965. Now a Harvest Furniture Store. The band continued playing bar shows. That's always surprising. Have any of you ever had an experience where you got to see a really big band in a really small setting? 5 sets a night, I already read that. Quickly changed the band's name after finding out that a different band known as the Warlocks had put out a record under the name. The Velvet Underground also changed their name from the Warlocks. So in the end, we never got a band called the Warlocks. Is that still available? Could somebody become the Warlocks? Can I be a Warlock? This is important questions. At what point do I get to name myself after a band that already passed away? I'm not going to, but just curious. The name The Grateful Dead was chosen from a dictionary. I've also heard it was chosen from the Book of the Dead. I've heard a couple of different versions of this, but this is the one I'm reading off of Wikipedia. Garcia picked up an old Barcinian World Language Dictionary. In that silvery elvish voice, he said to me, "Hey man, how about the Grateful Dead?" I can't do a Jerry Garcia impression. Let me see if I can. Hey man. No, I can't. The definition, there was the soul of a dead person or an angel showing gratitude to someone who, as an act of charity, arranged their burial. That's interesting. According to Alan Christ, director of the Grateful Dead's music publish company Ice Nine, Garcia found the name in the Funk and Wales folklore dictionary. When his finger landed on that phrase while playing a game of Fictionary. So Ice Nine, y'all know the history behind Ice Nine? Like, are you aware of Jerry Garcia's book reading habits? This is I'm going to get off topic again, but this is interesting to me. So Ice Nine, it happens to be the chemical that ends up destroying the world in the book Cat's Cradle by Kurt Vonnegut. So Jerry Garcia was a big fan of Kurt Vonnegut's books. I believe I've read that his favorite book he ever had was Sirens of Titan, which is a different Kurt Vonnegut book. But Ice Nine is the theoretical chemical in those books that ends up destroying the world. So I'm sure Garcia had some influence in making sure their company was named Ice Nine. That's just interesting to me. And Cat's Cradle is a beautiful book. Like, it's a beautiful book about the end of the world. The term Grateful Dead appears in folklore from a variety of cultures. The first show under the name Grateful Dead was in San Jose on December 4th, 1965, at the Acid Tests. Ken Kesey Acid Test specifically. Scholar Michael Collier was written that the Dead's participation in the acid test was crucial both to the development of their improvisational vocabulary and to their bonding as a band, with the group having sent out to foster an intra-band musical telepathy. So that's also something that's always fascinated me about the Grateful Dead. If you listen to their live music, it goes so far out to places that doesn't even sound like there's any structure or communication. And then a snap, they're right back into the real song. And a lot of that might be attributed to their use of LSD, that connection of it. I believe that. I believe that 100%. You know, the oneness, I, the idea that divinity lives within each of us and that part of it can be accessed at any point, and the thought that LSD is actually a pathway to help us understand those different connections with each other. But this is getting a little off topic again. Further pointed out that the Dead's pursuit of their new improvisational rock language in 1965 chronologically coincided with the same goals adaptation by Jefferson Airplane, Pink Floyd, and the Velvet Underground. Early demo tapes have survived, but the first of 2,000 concerts known to have been recorded by the band's fans was a show at the Fillmore Auditorium in San Francisco on January 8, 1966. Later that month, the Grateful Dead played at the Trips Festival, a 3-day psychedelic rock weekend party and event produced by Ken Kesey, Stuart Brand, and Roman Sender. That, in conjunction with the Merry Pranksters, brought the hippie movement together for the first time. December 2nd, 1992. Oh, Denver. I love Denver. That was another aside. I got to the Marley Brothers at the Red Rocks Theater pretty recently there, and it's a beautiful place. Once again, I'm in Vermont now. I definitely miss being in California, but I like Denver too. That was a beautiful place. Other supporting personnel who joined early included Rock Scully, who had heard the band from Kesey and signed on as manager after meeting them at the Big Beat Acid Test. Stuart Brand, with his sideshow of tape music and slides of Indian life, a multimedia presentation at the Big Beat, and then expanded at the Trips Festival. And Owsley Stanley, the Acid King whose LSD supplied the acid test and who in early 1966 became the band's financial backer, rented them a house in the fringes of Watts, Los Angeles, and buying them sound equipment. We were living solely off of Owsley's good graces at the time. His trip was he wanted to design equipment for us, and we were going to have to be in a sort of a lab situation for him to do it. Oh yeah, Red Rocks is beautiful. Definitely go if you get the chance. I had a great time. You could definitely feel the energy of the place. There's a certain magic attitude to it. And then back into Owsley Stanley. I've read some interesting stories about that too. Basically, he was coming up and conducting his acid, his LSD, at the roof above where the Grateful Dead were staying in that apartment, and they would probably be constantly dosed and slowly getting that connection. This goes along with Bill and Mickey actually trying to go into it. 100 of show. Ooh, that must have been lovely. His trip was he wanted to design equipment. Pigpen. So Pigpen is an awesome figure as well. He's a part of the Forever 27 Club. It's just he doesn't get as much talk. Used to live up the road. That's awesome. One of the earliest major performances in 1967 was the Mantra Rock Dance, a music event held on January 29, 1967 at the Avalon Ballroom by San Francisco Hare Krishna Temple. The Grateful Dead performed at the event along with Hare Krishna founder... I'm not going to be able to say that, folks. Bhaktivanta Swami. Poets Allen Ginsberg, bands Moby Grape, Big Brother and the Holding Company of Janis Joplin produced to the temple, and the band's first LP, The Grateful Dead, was released on Warner Brothers in 1967. In May 3rd, 1968, the band played a free concert at Columbia University during the anti-Vietnam War student protest, during which students occupied several campus buildings in order to play. The band, equipment, and all had to be smuggled onto the campus in the back of bread delivery trucks. That's pretty awesome. Killington. Oh, okay. What do I know about Killington? That's ringing such a bell. We were already jamming away before the security and police could stop us. I love hearing those stories about the old Grateful Dead, especially like them sneaking off, the way they got their musical equipment into some shows, the way they would do shows just on the street, and then everybody would just leave, so the police would have nobody to bust because there was nobody really in charge, and they get away with it. Like that's the way. Have nobody in charge, have nobody take blame, and nobody can get arrested. We need more stuff like that nowadays. So on May 3rd, 1968, Free Campus, Columbia University, I literally just read that. Classically trained trumpeter Phil Lesh performed on bass guitar. Bob Weir, the youngest original member, was the rhythm guitar. Pigpen played keyboard, percussion, and harmonica. He also sang. Garcia, Weir, yeah, I know all that. Lead vocals, Lesh sang only a few leads, but his tenor was a key part of the band's three-part harmony. You can hear him on this track. Okay. September 1967 was joined by a second drummer, New York native Mickey Hart, who also played a variety of percussion instruments. Mickey Hart is an interesting figure. I remember reading that him and Bill Kretzmann used to basically do hypnosis with each other while they had their arms tied so they could really get into sync while they were playing drums. How many bands do you know that have two drummers? That's not an easy thing to do. I mean, I could see a drummer and a percussionist getting along a little better, but a drummer and drummer, well, anyway. 1970 included tour dates in New Orleans, where the band performed at the Warehouse for 2 nights. On January 31st, 1970, the local police raided their hotel on Bourbon Street and arrested and charged 19 people with possession of various drugs. The second night concert was performed as scheduled after bail was posted. Eventually, the charges were dismissed on everybody except for Owsley Stanley, who was already facing charges in California for the manufacturing of LSD. This event was later memorized in the lyrics of Trucking, a single off of the American Beauty record that reached 64 on the charts. Yeah. Busted down in New Orleans. Yeah, that's what that's about. Hart took time off from the band in February 1971 after his father, an accountant, absconded with much of the band's money. That's also a very common theme for most musical groups. Somebody tries to steal what you got. That's a pain. Direwolf. I love Direwolf. That's one of my favorite Grateful Dead songs. Quick aside. Hart took time off from the band in February 19... I just read that. After Constantine's departure, Pigpen reclaimed his position as sole keyboardist. Less than 2 years later, in 1971, Pigpen was joined by another keyboardist, Keith Gottschalk, who played grand piano alongside Pigpen's Hammond B3 organ. In early 1972, Keith's wife, Donna, would join. Following the Grateful Dead's Europe 72 tour, Pigpen's health had deteriorated to the point that he could no longer tour with the band. His final concert was June 17, 1972, at the Hollywood Bowl in Los Angeles. Died on March 8th. Nothing's gonna get him back. He's gone. Yeah. I like that song. Died on March 8th, 1973 of complications from his liver damage. rat in a drain ditch caught on a ledge. I know better, but you know him. Yeah, talking about how rats, it's rats in the drain ditch. Like, don't help him. But then later on, it kind of took on a different like train of thought after Pigpen died, especially. He's gone. That's another beautiful song. What album is that on? I don't remember. Pigpen's death did not slow down the Grateful Dead. With the help of manager Ron Rocco, the band soon formed its own record label, Grateful Dead Records. Later that year, it released its next studio album, the jazz-influenced Wake of Flood, which became the biggest commercial success thus far. Meanwhile, capitalizing on the album's success, the band soon went back to the studio and in June 1974 released another album, From the Mars Hotel. Not long after, the Dead decided to take a hiatus from live touring. The band traveled to Europe for a string of shows on September 1974 before performing a series of live concerts in the Winterland Ballroom in San Francisco in October 1974 and delved into various projects. Wasn't coming back. Yeah. Where was I? Europe, Winterland, concerts filmed, footage for the Grateful Dead movie, a feature-length concert film released in 1977. I have a copy of the Grateful Dead movie still. I'm pretty sure I have it on VHS around here. I don't even have a VHS player. But yeah, that's a cool thing. September 1975, the Dead released their 8th studio album, Blues for Allah. The band resumed touring in June 1976, playing multiple dates in small theaters rather than stadium shows that had become common, and it exhausted them in 1974. That same year, they signed on Arista Records, and a new contract produced Terrapin Station. Terrapin Station is one of my favorite album arts. Once again, I have... There we go. I have the Terrapin, turtle on my arm. Often considered one of the band's best performances of the career. September 1977 concert, Raceway Park, New Jersey, was attended by 107,000 people. Keith and Donna left the band in 1979, citing artistic differences. Ugly Rumors. Huh. Mars Hotel, Ugly Rumors. I don't have that album. I'm sure I could Google it real quick. Mars Hotel. Spend a little time on the hill. So, I don't know how well you can see this, but I brought up the album Mars Hotel. It's fascinating. The way to go. I can't see it very well here, but that's a fascinating little fact. Oh, you said upside down in a mirror. Huh. I love how there's so many secret little things you could find in music all the time, especially when artists were more inclined to make their own art. This is going to trail off into my anti-AI things in a second. I'm not going to keep going down that path. But, collages. Can people do more collages for album arts? Can, we have more painters doing stuff again? Can we have more secret messages? I don't want to see, a generic AI robot designed to be looking like a fish or whatever. Side thought done. Following the Goldcheck's departure, Brett Midland joined as keyboardist and vocalist and was considered the perfect fit. Great singer. I love listening to him. The Goldchecks then formed the Heart of Gold band before Keith died in a car accident in 1980. Midland was the keyboardist for the Grateful Dead for 11 years until his death by narcotic overdose in July of 1990, becoming the third keyboardist to die. Yeah, I don't like AI. Oh, okay. I'll have to do this another time, but that's an interesting fact. You know your stuff. I believe it. I feel it. Dead fish cheese spread. I dig that, man. That's right on. Anyway. Shortly after Midland found his place in the early 1980s, Garcia's health began to decline. He became a frequent smoker of Persian opium. Speedballs. I remember hearing about this as well. A combination of smokable Persian opium, which was essentially heroin, and cocaine to stay awake so you can enjoy it. I love me Jerry Garcia, but he had some interesting traits. Gained weight at a rapid pace, lost his his liveliness on stage, his voice was strange. The Deadheads were worried for his health. After he began to curtail his opiate usage in 1985, he slipped into a diabetic coma for several days. In 1986, leading to the cancellation of all concerts that year. Garcia recovered, the band released In the Dark, and that's when Touch of Grey came out. Isn't that fascinating? Ooh. That's pretty good. That's pretty cool. I'm near New York now. Not like super close, but I can drive there. It's possible. That's beautiful, man. June 30th. Bob Dylan. Dylan and the Dead. That's a good album. I've listened to that one. I own that somewhere, but I don't know where it is. Midland died in July of 1990, and Dennis Welnick, former keyboardist for The Tubes, joined as a band member. Bruce Hornsby also joined for a brief period. Bridge performed on keyboards, vocals, Welnick until the band's end, and Hornsby mainly from the 1900s to 1902. Oh. All right. So, I feel like my phone is going to be dying soon, as well as my laptop. Give me a moment to plug things in, folks. 1 second, and then we will continue on. Phil Lesh. What a fascinating figure. Up. Bad phone stand. I hate this thing. There we go. And I think it's time to flip this record as well. Ends on New Speedway Boogie, which is an awesome tune. Dun 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 bow bow bow. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. Wore a suit in that show for some reason. That's funny. Was his hair shorter? I know he cut his hair for a little while and began to be a little more presentable for a bit. Let me see. What? 1988? So 1988, 85. So this is after the diabetic coma. And after Touch of Grey came out. So yeah, he was probably trying to look a bit nicer for a bit, I would guess. 5 concerts with the band, performed their final concert at Soldier Field in Chicago, July 9th, 1995. Garcia died in 1995, August 9th, 1995 to be exact. A few months after Garcia's death, the remaining members of the Grateful Dead decided to disband. You know, and that's when they started to become all those different forces and everything. I know this is supposed to be primarily about Phil Lesh, but I feel like the Grateful Dead is worth talking about in a lot of detail, especially considering Phil Lesh being the basis for the Grateful Dead. 1998, Bob Weir, Phil Lesh, and Mickey Hart, along with several other musicians, formed a band called The Other One and performed a number of concerts that year, releasing a live album, The Strange Remain. Huh, that's cool. No worries, friend. Good to hear from you. Thanks for joining. I don't know what time it is over there, if it's 12. Is daylight savings, is that real? Did that happen everywhere? Yeah. Goodbye, my friend. Thank you for joining. In 1998, Bob Weir, Phil Lesh, and Mickey Hart, alongside with several other musicians, I literally just read all of this. Toured, Time, Kretzmann, but without Lesh. With Kretzmann, but without Lesh. After taking another year off, the band toured again in 2002 with Lesh. That year, the Other Ones then included all 4 living former members of the Grateful Dead, who had been in the band for most of all of its history. Different time, the shifting lineup on the Other Ones also included guitarist Mark, Henney, Steve, Hornsby, 2003. Hello! Oh, goodbye. The Other Ones still included Weir, Lesh, 2009, Dead Tour, Lesh and Weir formed the band Further, which debuted in September 2009. Joining Lesh and Weir in Further were Chimenti keyboard, guitar, Joe Russo, Jane Lane, Sunshine Becker, and Zoe Ellis. Left the band in 2010. Hart and Kretzmann reformed the Rhythm Devils and played a summer concert tour. The fall of 2015, Hart, Kretzmann, and Weir teamed up with Chimenti guitarist John Mayer. Oh yeah, Mayer. Has anybody seen John Mayer with the Dead? I actually like John Mayer. So I don't know how much. I haven't watched that closely.
1995, the former members of the Grateful Dead have also pursued solo music. Both Bob Weir and Rat Dog and Phil Lesh and friends have performed many concerts and released several albums. Mickey Hart and Bill Kretschmann have also each released a few albums. Hart has toured with the world music percussion ensemble Planet Drum, as well as Mickey Hart Band. Wasn't it Mickey Hart who was doing with Bill? No, here it is. Billy and the Kids. Okay. That was Bill Kretschmann. Bill Kretschmann is one of the guys who's helping to put on Billy Strings. Like, that's pretty cool. You know, Billy Strings does a lot of Grateful Dead covers. I highly recommend checking him out if you haven't. But Billy Strings on his own is also great. I know he's been getting away from Grateful Dead covers more recently because he's trying to do his own thing. And is well encouraged. Like, that guy's good. Don't know about Billy Strings? I got a video about Billy Strings. That dude's good. October 2014, it was announced that Martin Scorsese would produce a documentary film about the Grateful Dead. Have you guys heard about this Martin Scorsese Grateful Dead film? Isn't Jonah Hill supposed to be Jerry? Who's everybody else? Also, Jonah Hill as Jerry Garcia. He's a pretty good actor. I wonder how that's going to go. Agreed to new interviews for the film. 4-hour documentary titled Long Strange Trip was released in 2017. Barlow died in 2018 and Hunter in 2019. Lesh died in 2024. So the writer and the musician, a lot of the Grateful Dead has passed. Fare thee well. In 2015, Weir, Lesh, Kretschmann, and Hart reunited for 5 concerts called Fare Thee Well, celebrating 50 years of the Grateful Dead. Fare you well, my buddy. No. Fare you well. Anyway, that's also a beautiful song. The shows were performed on June 27th and 28th at the Levi Stadium in Santa Clara, California, and on July 3rd, 4th, and 5th at the Soldier Field in Chicago. Oh, that's awesome. I wanted to see something at the Sphere. That would be so cool. Anyway, the band stated this would be their final time that Weir, Lesh, Hart, and Kretschmann would perform together. They were joined by Trey Anastasio of Phish. Demand for tickets was very high. The concerts were simulcast via Videos Media. The Chicago shows have been released as a box set. I didn't know that. So I can still see it if I really want it if I buy the box set. You all folks, give me 1 second. I have small children hanging out. You know, it's good to have them like with music, but I'm going to close the door so we don't hear them. I mean, like happy sounds of children is not the worst thing to hear in the background, but it's a little distracting. Give me one moment. Here I was. The Grateful Dead formed during the era where bands such as the Beatles, the Beach Boys, and the Rolling Stones were dominating airwaves. The Beatles were why they turned from a jug band into a rock and roll band, said Bob Weir. I think I remember hearing that story. Basically, they put on the record of the Beatles as soon as they came out, and they decided to do a more electric approach. What we saw them doing was impossibly attractive. I couldn't think of anything else more worth doing. Former folk scene star Bob Dylan had recently put out a couple of recordings featuring an electric guitar. Yeah, that's another historic moment as well. What the Bob Weir, no, not the Bob Weir, the Bob Dylan concert where he starts to come out and actually play electric guitar. That influenced a lot of those folk groups around that time, you know, 50s, 60s, to switch from trying to be a more folk-based band. Once again, Grateful Dead started as a jug band to be more of an electric group. Good old Bob Dylan. All right. Put out a couple. Grateful Dead members have said that it was after attending a concert by the touring New York City band The Loving Spoonful that they decided to go more electric and look for a dirtier sound. Jerry Garcia and Bob Weir, both had been like folk musicians primarily, of the late 1950s and 60s, were open about the use of electric guitars. Grateful Dead's early music in the mid-60s was part of the process of establishing that psychedelic music was, but theirs was essentially a street party form of it. A street party of psychedelic music. Hi! How's it going? Yes, I exist and I keep making things, and I'm probably going to keep making things. I'm happy to see you as well, I imagine. What was I talking about? Sound, Street Party. They developed their psychedelic playing as a result of meeting Ken Keasley in Palo Alto, California, and subsequently becoming the house band for the acid test he staged. They did not fit their music to established categories such as pop, rock, blues, folk, rock, or country and western. They were the Grateful Dead. Individual tunes within their repertoire could be identified under one of these stylistic labels, but overall their music drew on all of these genres and more frequently melded them into several different forms. Bill Graham said the Grateful Dead, "They're not the best at what they do, they're the only ones that do what they do." That's a cool quote. Auction my shirt and my hat? No. 50 pounds? Ha. Man, I'm gonna be honest, I need the money, but I need my hat. I don't care that much about this hat. Though, if I don't do my hair, it's a mess. You're getting me very distracted. Like, I need to retie these eventually, but, these are natural dreads, so I just let them be. More of that commitment to myself, as well as those biblical principles of, like, detaching from the vanity and everything, and plus I want to be strong like Samson. And the hat is so I don't have to pretend like I try. No, and the shirts I just wear. Oh, you probably saw me talking about some other record. I listen to a lot of music. There's a lot of great music out there, but today we're talking about the Grateful Dead, specifically Phil Lesh. Where was I? They're not the best at what they do, they're the only ones that do what they do. That's always a fascinating feature too. You'll see all kinds of folks at like jam-based concerts. There's the musical people who are really interested in like the actual musicality of everything, and there's the people who are there to party, and both of them are awesome folks to hang out with. A lot of the time I fit into the musical aspect and the party aspect, so it's nice to be able to bounce from place to place. Their live shows, fed by an improvisational approach to the music, were different from most touring bands. I remember hearing the Grateful Dead never wrote down a set list. They kind of just played what they felt like during the day, and that's what came out. Garcia stated in a 1966 interview, "We don't make up set lists beforehand. We'd rather work off the top of our heads than off a piece of paper." Oh, I literally just said that. That's funny. They maintained this approach throughout their career. For each performance, the band drew material from an active list of 100 or so songs. There was constant covers. I'm also a big fan of Jerry Garcia band. I really love his R&B and reggae covers, but that's beside the point. Beginning in the early 1990s, a new generation of bands became inspired by the Grateful Dead's improvisational ethos and marketing strategy, and began to incorporate elements of the Grateful Dead's live performance into their own shows. These included highly altered set lists, frequently improvisations, and blending of genres, allowing for an allowance of taping, which would often contribute to the development of a dedicated fan base. Bands associated with the expansion of the jam scene included Phish, the String Cheese Incident, Widespread Panic, Blues Travelers, Moe, and the Disco Biscuits, to name a few. There's so many jam bands out there that are awesome. But yeah, many of these groups began to look past the American roots music that the Grateful Dead drew inspiration from and incorporated elements of progressive rock, hard rock, and electronica. At the same time, the internet gained popularity and provided a medium and their performances in download MP3s. The Grateful Dead, as well as Phish, were one of the first bands to have Usenet news group. As the band and their sound matured over 30 years of touring, playing, and recording, each member's stylistic contributions became more defined, consistent, and identifiable. Garcia's lead lines were fluid, supple, and spare, owning a great deal of their characteristic to his experience playing Scruggs-style banjo, an approach which often makes use of note syncopation, accenting arpeggios, staccato chromatic runs, and the anticipation of the downbeat. Garcia had a distinctive sense of timing, often weaving in and out of the groove established by the rest of the band as if he were pushing the beat. His lead lines were also immensely influenced by jazz soloists. Garcia cited Miles Davis, Ornette Coleman, Bill Evans, Pat Martino, George Benson, a long list, Duke Ellington, Django Reinhardt as his primary influences. Now, I'm going to skim over the rest of the Garcia's information because I'm trying to talk about Phil Lesh. Lesh was originally a classically trained trumpet player with an extensive background in music theory, but did not tend to play traditional blues-based bass forms. Blues bass bass forms. Blues bass bass forms. Blues bass bass forms. Try to say that. I dare you, wherever you are. Try to say it. So, he often played more melodic, symphonic, and complex lines, often sounding like a second lead guitar. In contrast to most bassists in popular music, Lesh often avoided playing the root of the chord on the downbeat, instead withholding as a means to build tension. So instead of playing the A, yes, Phil Leah? Ah, well that's funny. Huh, thank you for the information. I don't think I can edit it anymore, but hey, we're going to be learning about Phil Leah, thanks to autocorrect. No, Phil Lesh, folks. I mean, I hope the picture... I could change it later on, right? Let me see if I can change it on my actual do. No, it does say Phil Leah. That's, well. And nobody called it out this whole time. Huh. I'm dyslexic, folks. I don't know if I mentioned that in the beginning of this, but I literally will sometimes look at letters and they all look the same to me because when I read, typically I'm looking at a couple letters and then just pretending I know what word comes out. Huh. I don't think I could change it. I think it's too late. I think we're going to be learning about Phil Leah for the rest of today. It's only me. No, we're good. I'm not going to start over. You want me to start all over again? I don't really want to do that. I'm just going to try to change it for now. Let me see. Bam, 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 bam. Yeah, I could change it. Station about 8:45. Cool. And now we are no longer learning about Phil Leah. That's funny. Thanks for the call out. It's funny how often I could say things and nobody notices. Where was I? Lesh was originally a classically trained trumpet player, often sounding like a second lead. I already said that. Syncopation. Weird too. Okay, now we're talking about the other members a bit more. The Dead's live performance featured multiple types of improvisation, derived from a vast array of musical renditions. Not unlike many rock bands of the time, the majority of the Dead's songs featured a designated section in which the instrumental break occurs over the chord changes. These sections typically featured solos by Garcia that often originated as a variation on the song's melody, but go on to create dynamic phrases that resolve by returning to the chord tones. Not unlike in traditional improvised jazz, they may occasionally feature several solos by multiple instruments with the undecided number of bars, such as keyboardists, before returning to the melody at the same time. Dead shows almost always feature a more collective modal approach to the improvisation that typically occurs during switch between songs before the band modulates to a new tonal center. Some of the Dead's more extended jam vehicles, such as the other one, Dark Star, and Playing in the Band, almost exclusively make use of the modulation between modes to accompany simple two-chord progressions. Following the songwriting resonance that defined the band's early 1970s period as reflected in the album Working Man's Dead and American Beauty, Robert Hunter, Jerry Garcia's primary lyrical partner, frequently made use of motifs common to American folklore, including trains, guns, elements, traditional musical instruments, gambling, murder. Oh, well, this might be deranged. With me, got two good eyes. All right, folks. After this song, I'm going to cut the stream. Thank you all for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this. I know I went on for a little while talking about all kinds of different things with a focus on Phil Lesh particularly, but like a little bit away. Behind, and you know that notion just crossed my mind. Watch your speed. Just crossed my mind. What's happening? Yeah, so last moment I was talking about from Mars Hotel I dove into really quickly. I was talking about the Grateful Dead and all of that. But extremely common, specifically job themes, sponsorships, 1992 live performances. Yes, the Grateful Dead was primarily known for their live performance. 1991 PBS documentary segment host Buck Henley attended August 1991 concert at the Shoreline Amphitheater and gleaned some information from some of the band members about the Grateful Dead phenomenon and its success. At the time, Jerry Garcia stated, "We didn't really invent the Grateful Dead, the crowd invented the Grateful Dead." You know what I mean? Huh. Well, thank you. Yeah, I could do more stuff about Columbia eventually, too. I'm actually going to be ending this stream here in just a moment. I think I just ended this album. And you know that notion just crossed my mind. Yep. Thank you all for joining. Thank you for coming out. Leave comments. Let me know what you want to hear next. I plan on doing a video on Phil Lesh here pretty soon using a lot of the information I talked about on this video, as well as some other things. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining. Have a great day. Peace, be good, all those things.